is because the presentations still are not yet over. And just continue to tell me if you're enjoying yourself so far. Kesha is saying riveting. They're saying thank you to the presenter so far from Mr. Brown. Tell us that you're enjoying yourself. If you stayed with us this long, we've been in here over now almost 2 hours and the number is increasing rather than the other way. And I can tell you it's a testament to just that persons are really, really pleased at what it is that we're doing here. Simone is enjoying every minute. Simone is one that has been here for 3. If you've been here every single day as well, tell me in the chat, tell us that you're enjoying Soft and Life Skills Conference and you're going to be here at every conference and webinar to come. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, I believe that we've been served. We've been served. We'll be treated well to a breadth of knowledge and insight that is almost hard to find anywhere free. And I am telling you, it's an ultimate pleasure. What we've heard so far starting off is just a story, a genuine and honest story of a young woman from Belize to the United States with just dreams and a suitcase in either hand and in mind. And how it is that we discover and go through genuine pain and understanding to try a drive to be successful, a drive to want to get to somewhere, and how it is that by steps every single day, that if every day isn't even well, we try by the hour and we keep it going. And Mr. Brown, who says that with grit, that with his mindset, and to how it is that he found his passions were giving back, and how it is that ultimately formed part of his journey. And ladies and gentlemen, I think it is therefore fitting to line up the other presenter that we have, where we're going to discover that. So we've heard these other stories. We've heard from Belize to the world, from Jamaica to the world. But if you're here with us so far, Ellen, if you're here with us, Gloria and Jeva and Sherry-Ann, how do you write your own story? How do you write our own story and create our own purpose? Regardless of what's been perceived, regardless if you're the little guy from that place in Spanish Town who ultimately was told he's not going to reach anywhere, how is it that you can do it regardless of what's perceived about you? As Renee says, claps. And ladies and gentlemen, we have an aptly full speaker to tell us on this topic, who is Miss Kimara Richardson Thomas. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her as she's here awaiting us. She's an educator with over 25 years of experience. She has a bachelor's degree in linguistics and a minor in English literature, a postgraduate diploma in education, and master's in philosophy and education. The focus on instructional supervision and perception studies. She's also the owner and administrator of the Academy of Creative English. So she offers us just a range of tuition services in the various areas of English to help persons. She does part-time tutoring, lecturing at both the University of the West Indies and Trinidad and Tobago, from 2008 to 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, she is one that in initial stages of the COVID-19 pandemic was part of a Tobago House of Assemblies Division of Education's e-learning team. These persons just volunteered, just continue to do what we're doing now in this session, to produce and present for persons' benefits, for local television, for YouTube, for all digital media geared towards helping students for their examinations. Ladies and gentlemen, she continues to be actively involved to this day. She's here to share, she's smiling, ladies and gentlemen. We're seeing the teeth, and I'm going to turn over now to our presenter, Ms. Kimara Richardson Thomas. Please make her welcome.
Thank you so very much, Shamar. Thank you very much. Thank you. And good night to everyone on the platform. And in particular, I want to say good night to the 2 presenters who went ahead of me. I was fixed in my seat. I'm listening. And I felt as if you were sharing from what I was going to share. And a lot of what you shared really touches on what it is. And I really like how you segued, Shamar, really, really well, because tonight is about the stories. Tonight is about what it is we have to say, what it is, how we can put it together. And as Shamar indicated, I am an educator. My background, my passion, my deepest interest where education is concerned is in the area of English language and helping students to write, helping students to tell stories, because I've found that as an educator, and especially in the area of instructing in English, I realized that it is an area that's compulsory. It is a compulsory area of study. And I felt that very often, many students were struggling. And I'm hoping that you're all hearing me clearly. And Shamar would indicate to me if you're hearing me loud and clear. All right, so we're all here. It's part of the joint effort with UE and the Alumni Association and the YoPro Global Network, looking at the soft and life skills series. And I'm looking at, and I'm sharing with you in the area of your pen, your purpose. And we're talking about how to write your own story and create your own purpose, regardless of what has been perceived about you. And when I listened to Mr. Brown, with his presentation, and even when questions were asked about how do you identify your purpose, and I love the answers that he gave. But one of the things I want to highlight from what Mr. Brown said, he said, I didn't want to be a victim stuck in an incomplete book. And I felt that was so profound. I wrote it down. I said, Mr. I'm borrowing it. Kirk, I borrowed it. You have not yet copywritten it. So after tonight, you can do the copyright. But I didn't want to be a victim stuck in an incomplete book. And very often, many of us can find ourselves exactly in that position of being a victim stuck in an incomplete book. But tonight, I want to encourage us. What we're talking about, it's your pen, your purpose. We're going to discuss how to get that book of your life completed. And even as we talk about that, I recognize that what gets written about us can fall into three categories. Our life's journey, as exciting as it can either be an autobiography, a biography, or it can be the tabloids. The difference really is who controls the information that goes out there. When you tell your own story, you are in control of the information that goes out. And when we work on our life story, our goal and aim should always be to create our own autobiography in this life. When we have the biography, yes, someone else will tell it for us. But we don't want our lives to be the tabloids, because when it is the tabloids, someone is going to be digging up the deepest, darkest secrets that we don't want out there. And that is what gets publicized. That is what gets remembered. And very often, we've seen and heard of individuals who've had tragic situations. We've heard stories over the last 3 nights from presenters who shared with us some of the pain, they heard the tragedies. But then think about those persons who did not have the opportunity to explain their side of the hurt, their side of the tragedy, but someone else decided to publicize it in the worst way possible. We want to write our autobiographies. We want to be in charge of the information that goes out. And in order to be able to do that in a very clear-cut manner, and we're going back to what Mr. Brown said, we're talking here about purpose. We're talking about purpose. I remembered some years ago, the late Dr. Miles Monroe said something that left a really profound impact on my mind. He said, if you want to know what is a child's purpose, look at the games that they play. Look at what it is, the games that children play. It's usually an indication of their passion and their purpose. And I used to like to play teacher. I enjoyed playing teacher. My sister and I would beat the furniture. That was back in the day when corporal punishment was still allowed in schools. We would beat the furniture. And I'd find any kind of red pencil, red pen, and we're correcting and marking work. My mother used to make plaster of Paris ornaments. And we had an old wardrobe that was outside. It was, in the yard, in a covered area of the yard. And pieces of plaster of Paris became our chalk on that old wardrobe door. And we would play teacher. We would play teacher. And Mr. Brown said something else. When you're looking at your passion, if you didn't have to do it, would you continue to do it? And that is key. What is it you enjoy doing, or what it is you enjoyed doing when you were younger? Because it is so important to tap back into that and identify what is your passion. Because in your passion, you will find that purpose. And you cannot begin to write your story. You cannot begin to craft your story. You would not be able to articulate your story until you've identified your purpose. And again, if you're not sure, we heard tonight what to do. If you're not sure, keep moving. So I want to give a little background in terms of my own story. And my story is still loading. And I just want to give a little bit of it, because when something is loading, you're not going to get all of it right now. And at the age of 27, I found myself back home in my parents' house after I'd been married for 5 years. I was a divorced single mother, and that seems to be a sort of recurring story that we're hearing. And I'd moved back into my parents' home. I had been working in the civil service as an accounts clerk. And if I can tell you, that was indeed the square peg in a round hole phase of my life. Accounts, where did that come from? But I worked as an accounts clerk for a number of years, and I'd moved back in with my parents after a failed marriage, a single mother. And I will tell you, I felt like a failure. I felt as if what I had wanted to do did not materialize. And I was also very angry with God, because I felt as if God had set me up. I felt as if I had been living as I was supposed to be, but things did not go according to my plan. And I felt at that time as if God had set me up. At the age of 29, my mother looked at me one day, and at that time I'd gotten the opportunity to teach. I had gotten the opportunity to work in a new secondary school with the qualifications that I had at the time. I had not yet attained a university degree, but with the qualifications that I had at that time, I was able to get into this secondary school system. And I live in Tobago. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. Big up to all the Trinidad and Tobago people on the platform. Yeah. And I live in Tobago. I grew up in Trinidad, and my family moved to Tobago when I was 14. And I continued my education in Tobago. And there were some new schools that were established. And I had the opportunity to work with one of the new schools as an assistant English teacher. And I'd been there for about a year, coming out of those times in the accounts department, now finding where I felt I needed to be, because as a child, everything felt like I needed to be a teacher. My mother looked at me one day and she said, "Kim, how come you've never gone to university?" My son at the time was 7 years old. And I'm looking at my mother, thinking to myself, but I didn't say anything as she asked me the question. And I'm thinking about my son. And before I could answer, she said, "If you are worried about your son, don't worry, he will be well taken care of." And as she said that to me, the next day, I began the process of applying to go to university, the very next day. I did not know what I wanted to do in terms of what it might have been called. I knew that I wanted to teach English, but I did not want to do English literature, because I felt at that time I had encountered a situation where many people. I'd been working for 1 year in the public school system, and I'd been tutoring privately already with adults. I was trained and worked part-time, volunteered as an adult literacy tutor. And what I kept encountering was many people who were struggling with the acquisition of standard English in my environment. They were struggling with the acquisition of a skill that was compulsory. And it was affecting their ability to get a job and to move on. And I wanted to know what it is I can study that would help me to help them. And I didn't want to do English literature because I felt if students can do English literature, it means that they can already do English language. And they were already competent in the compulsory area. So I decided to write to the University of the West Indies and explain to them what my interest was. Explain to them what my desire was. And just as I explained it to you, I explained it to them. And they wrote back and sent me a prospectus directing me to linguistics. Because up to that time, I felt that linguistics really involved learning all of these languages. And that's when I got clarity and I understood that learning all of the other languages meant being bilingual or multilingual. But linguistics was the science of language. How do we learn the language? What are the barriers and hindrances to acquiring language? And I read what they sent to me and it spoke to my heart. And I felt, yes, this is what I want to do. And I began the process and I applied and I went to the University of the West Indies and I did my bachelor's degree in linguistics and I came back and in fact, I returned to the school that I was originally placed in, that new school. And this is where I've been for all of my teaching career. It was a new school and it really allowed me to really grow and become more mobile professionally. But one of the things that I learned over these many years is that teaching students how to write stories really is a mirror of life. Because when we write stories and when we learn to write stories well, it replicates our development. It replicates our life's journey. So I want to be able to share with you some of the things that I've learned and how I might be able to, if possible, motivate or encourage anyone else to apply some of these skills. And we're talking about the 5-step writing process. And remember, you heard the introduction, I'm an educator, I'm a teacher, so that there will be some aspect of teaching if necessary. And I know that we have some persons on the platform who are university students, and we have many who've graduated, we have many people in various walks of life. But you see, the 5-step writing process is applicable to every phase of our lives. And if I'm wrong, at the end of the presentation, put it in the chat and tell me I was wrong. I can take that. But we want to talk about how we integrate these 5 steps into writing our stories and making sure that what we eventually publish about our lives is what we want others to know, hear, and learn about us. The first step in this process is the planning. And when I found myself at age 29, divorced, single parent, and then getting the opportunity to make some changes, I knew that I needed a plan. And it's the first step in developing your story. I recognized that I needed to make some changes and I had to make a plan. Because you see, the plans that we make are very crucial. Everything that we go on to do must have at its core a plan in order for it to be successful. Everything that we want to achieve must have at its center a plan. My plan at that time was to go on to university and make some changes in my life. And I would tell you, I lived in Tobago. The closest place for me to get this degree was at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. But I did not want to go there because I knew if I went to UWI St. Augustine in Trinidad, I would be close to family. And at that point in time in my life, because I knew I needed to begin to write this story and make some changes, I felt that if I had been too close to family, I might have found myself with more support than I felt I needed at the time. Let me explain. I'd always been a very amenable, submissive, compliant, quiet type of person, especially at age 29, very shy and introvert. And I recognized at the time, as I began to formulate my plan, that going forward, I needed to change that perception. And I knew that my family had that perception. I came from a family that loved me, still do. They love me. My family loves me. I know that. They've said it to me. Family members have said it. We are that kind of family. They're not afraid to tell you, I love you. So I grew up in that kind of environment with that kind of support and that kind of love. And it really helped me. But I needed to, for want of a better phrase, I needed that new bird experience. I needed to be thrown out of the nest to learn to fly. And there are times in our planning, we have to understand that we need to really get out of our comfort zones. And I recognized at that point in my plan that I needed to get out of my comfort zone if my story needed to change. Remember, my story is still loading. And in moving forward, I decided to go to Barbados. I wanted to be far away or enough distance. I wanted to create enough distance from my immediate family, but not so far away that I could not be able to see my son on a regular basis. So I made my plan. When we are crafting our stories for our lives, we have to make time for planning. Stephen Covey says that wars are won in the general's tent. If we don't set aside the time to make the plans, we are going to crash. The Bible says that many other plans in a man's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that will prevail. And I made my plans to go to Barbados. I didn't have enough funds, but again, even though I was angry with God for how things turned out where my marriage was concerned, God was still in the midst of this. He was still there assisting with the planning and getting to where I got to, because I remember getting to Barbados and I barely had enough money for housing and food. Some family members gave me some money. I had a few $100 in savings, but I recognized when I got there, I was able to get accommodation on campus, which was cheaper than off campus, sorry. I was able to, and with the help of my mother, I packed groceries, and every semester I was going with this container of food from Tobago to Barbados. It worked out that I was getting the books I needed at the library because I couldn't afford books. And I was thankful that I lived on campus because I would not have been able to afford to travel, transport to and from campus. But I used what I had, and God also provided. And one of the things about making plans, the plans need a certain level of flexibility. Because sometimes if our plans are a little too rigid, if and when there's a change in the plan or there's a bump in the road, we may not know how to cope. We may not know how to adjust. So we have to be resilient and we have to be flexible while we are planning. Know what the goal is, but Make space for the contingencies. Ask yourself, what will happen if this? How will I manage if that? There are scenarios that we ought to prepare for. Have your plan A, B, C, D, I do the whole alphabet. Because if we are caught unawares, we can panic. Some people can. And there's no room for panic when you're writing this story. And I don't want to sound unrealistic. We are human beings. We are human beings. But we can minimize the panic. We can minimize the stress if we factor in these contingency plans while we are planning. I want to add here at this time, even for those of you who are still in university or who are recent graduates, understand something. When we go to university, when we go to college and we come out expecting a particular job and we don't get it, if we don't get it, always remember that you've graduated with a set of skills. One of those being critical thinking, so that you are equipped with tools and resources to figure out something, so that we are not dependent on someone else giving us a job. I want us to understand this, because many times we can become very disappointed if we leave. And I'm being fair, I'm being very fair, and being very honest. I know that I had that opportunity. I got a job when I came out. But many university graduates right now are not getting that opportunity. Things have changed. But I want you to remember, if you've not yet graduated, put this in your plan. If you've recently graduated, make it a plan. What are the tools and skills and resources I have now acquired that I could find a way to earn an income, to generate finances? Because you've been equipped with something that you can work with. We're going to continue. The second step in our story is the writing. Write it down. The Bible also says, write the vision and make it plain, that they may run who see it. It's very important to write it down. You know that many times we come up with an idea, we have a plan, we want to do this, we don't write it down, we forget it. And we don't want to forget the plan. So write it down. As you write down the plan and you begin to articulate it, what is your goal? My goal at that time was to make some changes. My goal at that time was to get out of this accounts department where I felt I was going to be stuck in a rut for some years, and to make a change, make some career changes that would have given me academic advancement, that would stimulated my mental development. And my goal was to make a change in that direction. What is your goal? You need to know your why. Why are you doing this? My why was to find a way to help persons to advance themselves. Before I left for university, I'd been involved in the media part-time. I was working during the day in my teaching, and even before, as I said before teaching, I was working in the public service in this account environment. And between the years in accounts and the 1 year I had in teaching before going to university, I had the opportunity to be trained in media and to work in radio and television. And I remember when I was leaving to go and study, persons asked, so, oh, Kim, you're going to study mass communication? And I said, no. And they were surprised. I said, I want to go and do linguistics because I want to teach. And they felt, you know, you were doing such a good job in communication. Why not continue there? And I said to them, if I continued in mass communication and studied mass communication, I would come back here and I would do a good job in mass communications. But I wanted to go and do something else that would enable me to come back here and help other people to enhance their own communication skills so that I can multiply myself and multiply my skill. Because in the why, it should include how do we connect with others? How do we expand who we are and what we're able to do? And my why was to make sure, especially at that time, what I'd seen for Tobago was that really many people were struggling with English language. I looked at some of the results that we were getting and I was confused. I was worried. I saw students who were studying hard, working hard, but they were struggling with the acquisition of the CSEC English A. And my why was to find a way to help them to overcome, to cross that hurdle. And the steps, my steps involved going to the university. Prior to that, it was learning or working with the Adult Literacy Tutors Association, ALTA. And the years with ALTA really broadened my horizon and opened my mind to what it is I needed to do when I eventually got into the public school system. So you take the steps, start the training, look at the opportunities that are available to you based on the resources that you have, and grab hold. I'm not saying take advantage of them, grab hold of them. You need to also be aware of your habits. I knew what my habits were. I am not a morning person. I'm still not a morning person. But when you have to make changes, you may also have to change habits. You have to make adjustments. And I had to do that. What are your habits? What are some habits that you may need to change as you begin to articulate your story? What are your skills? As an educator, I've learned to really appreciate those persons who can do things with their hands. I remembered growing up when we used to hear, that you go to school and study or else we'll send you to plant garden. Or we'll send you to learn a trade. It was a threat. Because the idea of doing a trade was looked down upon back in the day. But I've lived to see how important these skills are now. And I'm not one, I don't have anything that I do with my hands other than type, but I know what my skills are. I can speak, I can share, I can read and understand, and I can help others to understand. So I use my skills. I found ways to use the skills that I have to help others. Identify your skill. We all have at least one. Many of us have a variety of skills. Identify your skills. How will they help you to craft your story? And in writing your plan, identify your team. When we talk about team, and I want to this is how I look at my team. When I think about my team, it's the 3 F's. My family, a few friends, and my faith in God. My family, a few friends, and faith in God. Well, it works out to 4 F's, but really 3. When I look at my team, my parents, who have always been there for me, always, always. My brothers and sisters, I come from a family of I'm the eldest of 7. And they've always been there for, now don't get me wrong, we quarrel, we fought, we argue, we still do, but the love is there and the support has always been there. 5 years ago, by the grace of God, I had the opportunity to remarry. December 16th, I would celebrate 5 years, my 5th anniversary. And my husband has been such a support for me. When I say to him, honey, I want to go and do this, go ahead. He would keep his eye open to make sure I'm managing, that I'm coping. But the support is there for me to fly and to grow. Identify your team. I say here to have a few friends. We may have hundreds of acquaintances, but we need to always have a core group of friends who support your goal and your vision and your story. Because sometimes we could surround ourselves with so many people that we may have a Judas in the midst. But when we trim the fat in terms of who we surround ourselves with, who are our closest companions, you're able to identify who are those who are really there for you. And I talk about my faith in God. Because again, as I said, I was angry with God at the start of that journey, very angry. I behaved from a spiritual point of view like a spoiled child with a temper tantrum. I was really upset with God for the way things turned out. And I'm telling you, I sensed when the Spirit of God said to me one day, okay, you finished? You finished quarreling and beating up yourself? You're ready to listen to me now? And I was able to calm down within myself and look and see how God had still been working with me, supporting me, directing me, and ensuring that I was able to accomplish what I needed to accomplish. So that in our planning, we need to write it down, write it down. Because here's what happens. We need to pay attention to our attitude in our planning and working on our story. We have to do some research to find out what works for us, generate a good idea that we can work with, identify what we need to change, and also pay attention to what we need to improve on. These are the innovations that we're going to apply when we talk about our stories. Have the right attitude. You will not be able to articulate a good story for yourself if your attitude is a negative one. And if it is a negative one, begin to seek out how you can change that attitude. Do the research, get the help, formulate an idea and a plan to make those changes so that you can have improvement. The third step in writing and crafting this story is revising. So after you've made your plan and after you've written it down, look at what it is you've written for your life. We need to take some time to go back and see what was already done and to look over where we've reached. So it involves a reevaluation. And my two pigeons are here having this conversation, and the first pigeon asks, what are other words for reevaluate? And my dear pigeon is here with his breadcrumbs that would have been given to him. And the second pigeon says, reassess, review, reconsider, re-examine, rethink, revise, have second thoughts, overestimate, revalue, overrate. We have to think this thing through. And it's okay to have second thoughts. We all know this. When you have an assignment to do, it can take two forms. It's either the homework that you would have that you could go home and do it, and you have some time to look it over and make some changes, and you have time. Or you're in the exam room where you're working against the clock. But even in the exam room, all of us who've gone through any type of academic environment, we know the number one rule after you have finished writing. Put it in the chat. When you finish writing, when you have finished writing, there's something that they tell you to do at the end of writing that before you submit it. Anybody can tell me what is that? If you're still there, if you're following, oh yes, there we go. Check over your work, revise. You don't write it and submit it. So that in telling your story, you don't do something and then go with it. Pause. Reevaluate. Read it over. What did I do yesterday? What did I plan to do last week? What was the plan? The New Year's resolution. Reevaluate. Revise the plan. And one of the interesting things about stories and writing, and why it's not a bad thing to have second thoughts. Some of the world's best writers, this is what they do. This is why we have new editions and revised editions, because the writer had second thoughts about something that they did before. And in your life's journey, understand that there will be phases where you would have to revise yourself. There are phases where you would need to reinvent yourself. There would be that new, improved version of yourself. But I want to encourage us to be very conscious about it, that we approach the development of the vision and the story in a very focused manner, in a determined manner, in a deliberate manner. Being aware that as we go through life, the plan you had at 20, and many who are on the platform who are in their 30s, 40s, you can look back. The plan you had at age 10 is not necessarily where you are now. The plan you had at 30 may not be where you are now, because we make these revisions. And that is where we come to. After you look at it, you revise it, you review, you reevaluate, then you want to start to edit. And it is in the editing, step number 4, this is where you may have to cut some things. Because here's what happens. If you change nothing, nothing will change. If we don't sit and it's not a bad thing to change your mind. I changed my mind. It's literally what we do. We change our minds. And we can do that because this is where the editing comes in. In crafting our stories, we have to come to the point where we realize that there may be some people in our lives we have to cut off. There may be some habits in our lives that we will have to cut off. There's some memories and situations and experiences that we're going to have to shelve so that they don't continue to overtake and overrun us, blocking our progress, blocking our passion, blocking our purpose. It is your pen. Craft your purpose. Make the necessary changes. And there's some things in this editing process we are not always able to erase. You may find it's a situation that you may need to white out something, or you create enough additional information around it that it makes the error less visible. Do not amplify the error. There are many others in our lives who will amplify it for us. But it is so important to make sure that not only your voice, but your actions after the error, your actions after the things that went wrong or the things that did not go according to plan. It is very important to make sure that your actions after that are amplified to the extent that it minimizes what did not go right, or you've crafted it into such a beautiful thing that it becomes the stepping stone to your success and it becomes an integral part of your story. We've heard stories tonight about the things that did not go according to plan and how integral they are to what the story has become. But in the revising, you need to be able to determine as you write your story, what is the role of this part of my story in the overall book of life? Because it's not everything that was negative or everything that went bad or that didn't go according to plan that we throw away. In order for the tree, and as Ms. Thomas, Serena said before, and she articulated and gave the analogy of the tree. And I want us to think about that. In the planting of a thing, you have to get into the dirt. Before there is growth, there can be a mess. And you look at any kind of growth, there will be a mess before. If there is, you talk about when a baby is born, birth of a baby is a messy thing. So that in order for growth and birthing to happen, there will be some mess. But understand and be able to be very clear about the role of the mess in your overall story. The fifth step that I want to share with us, the fifth step in our story, in writing our story, is the publishing. Publishing, and essentially what we're talking about here is tell them what you are doing well. Let them know what you're doing well. You are in charge of what is published about you. Because as we started off in the beginning, it's the autobiography. Do not depend on others to tell your story. It is your pen, your purpose. Tell them what you are doing well. But the challenge that we often have with this is that we have been socialized to think self-praise is no praise. So let's talk about that. Because again, we are saying in writing this story, the fifth and very important step is to publish. Because you can do so many good things to reevaluate your life and to make some changes when the perception about you has been negative. But if no one knows what has changed, all they will remember is what had failed. And people are very good at remembering the negative. They're good at remembering when the marriage failed, when you had an abortion, when you stole something, when you got into a fight, when you cursed off the boss. They're very good at remembering the negative. And it's really because, again, in our environment, in our culture, we like bacchanal. Bacchanal sells. Bacchanal stays in our mind. And we remember the bacchanal. And again, it is why it's so important as we craft our story to make sure that what they hear and see and remember is not the bacchanal that might have been a downfall, that might have been the negative part. And I want to share, so get ready to get close to wrapping up. 6 tips to improve your self-promotion skills from CIO. It's a digital magazine that promotes tech news and analysis. And one of their writers, their senior writer, Sharon Florentine, shared these 6 tips to improve your self-promotion skills. Because again, we are talking about your pen, your purpose. And how do you get to the publishing stage of your life's journey and your life's story? And I want to share what it is she shared because I felt it was so profound. It was so beautiful. And this is what she said. Number 1, don't assume, and especially in the work environment, don't assume that your boss knows exactly what you do. Don't assume that the people around you know what you do. You know what it is you're doing, but make sure that you're finding a way to move your story. One of our speakers last night, and that was Casey Delapina, he said, find him on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a very good place to ensure that your bosses, your supervisors, potential employers know what you do and what you're capable of. Casey encouraged us to connect with him on LinkedIn. I never met Casey before, saw him last night, wrote down his name because I have to go and look for Casey on LinkedIn. And you want to build your LinkedIn profile so that you can ensure that future employers, that your bosses, they know exactly what you do. Number 2, coming out of Ms. Florentine, she said, embrace the difference between articulating your value and bragging. And this is where sometimes we may have a difficulty because we think if you're doing self-promotion, you're bragging, you're praising yourself. And again, we have been socialized to believe that you don't share your own accomplishments. Let someone else do it for you. You are writing your story. This is not the biography of your life. It's an autobiography. But we need to understand the difference between articulating your value and bragging. Kurt said earlier tonight that it's not arrogance. It is self-actualization. You need to know when and where to share your content. You've developed something, share it. Share it on the social media platforms. Share it on LinkedIn. Share it on the professional platforms that exist in your specific area on Facebook. If you're using Instagram, share your accomplishments, share your achievements. Let them know because again, the same people who remembered what went wrong, they're the same ones who are going to turn around and say, but I didn't know she could, but I didn't know he could. And they will never know the good that you're capable of doing unless you begin to articulate your achievements and your accomplishments. Join those professional social media platforms and share it. You can do that very subtly. You can do that, but put it out there. Number 3, adopt an accomplishment mindset and narrative. This involves putting together what it is you've done, and even though you're sharing it, make sure you document it. Keep a journal. Find somewhere to store your information to show, especially over the period of a year, what have I done? It comes in very handy, especially when it's time for performance appraisals and your employer might ask, so, what did you do this year? And then you're sitting there and you're trying to remember. Begin to develop that habit of an accomplishment mindset and an accomplishment narrative. Be able to articulate clearly what your accomplishments are. Number 4, quantify your worth. Know what you bring to the table. Know your worth. I've been involved in tertiary tutoring and lecturing with some of the local institutions here in Trinidad and Tobago for quite a number of years. But one of the things I realized, and as those who were here for the introduction, I also have my own business, my own private business, looking at tuition services in the area of English language, literature for primary to secondary. But in the beginning, I only had one class for secondary students, and the demand started to grow for primary, and I was trying to find a way to do this. And I was having this class on a Saturday. But during the week, about 2-3 days a week, I was tutoring and lecturing for some of our local universities here in Tobago in their bachelor's programs and their master's programs. And this was in the afternoon after I finished working at my school. And at my school, I'm Dean of Academic Studies. So I'd work during the day, and then from about 5 o'clock, I would be doing the private tutoring during the week. And I'm very involved in church, involved in various aspects of ministry. And then on Saturdays, I'd have the private class, and then church on Sundays and so on. And I was feeling burnt out. And then I started to recognize that I was doing the tuition, the lecturing, and the tutoring with the tertiary institutions. But when I looked at what I was being paid at the time and looking at my output, there was no equity. And I made a decision to leave the tertiary institutions and invest more of my time in my private tuition business. And I saw an increase in my earnings without the same level of burnout. And I was able to expand into the primary area. So I had the primary, upper secondary, and then there became a demand during the period of COVID for a lower secondary class because I began to quantify my worth. And we have to do that. Quantify your worth. What are you bringing to your organization? What are you bringing to the environment that you're working in? What is your value? Know how you can articulate that and quantify your worth. Number 5, source and shape your success story. Again, this is the documenting. What have you done well? Write it out. Shape it. Fashion it. What are the success stories that you want out there? Begin to articulate it. Begin to shape it. And be very, very aware of how you're putting it out there. Number 6 is to master the 3-part accomplishment statement. I love this when I read it. Master the 3-part accomplishment statement. This is what it involves. You want to be able to craft a single 3-part statement that says what you did, what it resulted in, and what were the results. What is the value of the results? So what did you do? What did it result in? And what is the value of these results to your organization? A simple 3-part statement. Because there are times, we can go on, we can babble and we can go on and on and on. and miss the point of what it is you're trying to let your employer, your boss, your supervisor, whoever it is, we can miss it. And I know I'm guilty of that. I can go all around the world and you can sometimes miss the point. But in developing your story, in that journal that you're going to keep, begin to find ways to articulate and to master that 3-part accomplishment statement. What it is you did, what were the results, and what value did it bring? So I told you at the beginning that my story was still loading. My story was still loading. When I had separated and gotten that divorce, when I came back from studying, I remember visiting an institution to take care of some financial business. And the person I was speaking with is someone I'd known for many years. And I remember she said to me while we were talking and working these things out, she paused and she said, I really admire you, and I was in shock. Because again, I told you I'd been an introvert and very, very quiet and to myself. She said, I really admire you. When you went through that divorce, I didn't think you could make it. I didn't think that, you would be able to manage. And when she said that to me, and this was just after I came out of university, that statement hit home to me in such a profound way because I realized that that was the perception that many people had. And that became my motivation to prove others wrong. I told myself that my story has to show that I can and will make it. When I was finished with my degree and I went on and I continued to study, I knew I had to get to that point of reviewing and editing. I had to make some changes, still make some changes. I wanted to keep pushing. But my favorite story in the Bible is David and Goliath. Because in every situation that I face, I see myself like David. Because I'm a small person, I'm a small woman. Tiny, I've always been tiny. But I've always said to myself, there must not ever be a situation ever again that I would face that it feels as if it's going to knock me down. Because the divorce took a toll on me. Some years after, I'd gotten engaged. And I was in it turned out to be a very stressful relationship. Very stressful. And that was taking a toll on me. And I look back and I said, but why? After all that I'd accomplished, why is this individual, or why am I allowing this individual to derail my story? And I made some cuts, editing. I had to make some decisions. I ended that engagement. As I said, I stopped the tertiary tutoring and lecturing. I expanded my private classes. I began to apply to mark the various regional exams at all of the levels, at CXC, at primary level, at the Cape level. I had already been exposed to marking for the tertiary level because I wanted to know what the examiners were looking for so that I can help my students to craft their stories towards success. I began to become more assertive because my story is still loading. Because I recognized I needed to do that. I realized that God was opening doors, and He does this for many of us. But we have a responsibility to walk into those doors when He opens them. And I began doing that. I stopped staying in the background because I started to realize, and I told my parents the other day, I felt that in the early stages of my life, it's as if I was walking through life in a coma. And when I began to see what was available to me, and I began to repurpose and rewrite my story, I said, I'm making up for lost time. And every opportunity that presented itself that I realized and recognized I can fit into, I jumped at it. And I pushed, I got involved. I would immerse myself. I said, I'm not going to stay in the background anymore. And I put myself out there. They're looking for something, raise my hand. I love change. I embrace change because change is an opportunity to stretch yourselves. And we have to understand that in crafting our stories, we have to be prepared for the change. Don't run from the change. Change is like that bad dog. It will chase you if you run from it. But pause. Let that dog sniff your hand. I'm not telling you to play that with a Rottweiler. But you know, some of these dogs that make a lot of noise, but they're very harmless in the long run. Let them get your scent. Let them smell your hand. Pat its head. Rub its head. When you do that with the dog, it's the same thing you do with the change. Take your time with the change, but look at it and don't run from it, because change is important as we craft the story. We have to embrace change or we would not edit. And until we edit, we cannot publish. All we would be left with, all we're going to be left with, as our friend said in the beginning, Kirk Brown, he said, you would be that victim stuck in an incomplete book. And we don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. My story is still loading. This year, I was accepted to begin studies for my PhD in the area of teaching and learning with emerging technologies. My story is still loading. I knew where I was at age 27. I celebrated my 50th birthday last week, Thursday. My story is still loading. I plan to be a very active old woman, should God spare life and should Christ tarry. I want to be a busy old woman once health and strength allows it. My motivation has been all of these elderly people who are still going. I'm not looking at the young people. I'm not looking at the young, because I believe I'm a late bloomer. I believe I'm living my best life now. I believe that this is the greatest time in my life. And I'm putting all of my energy into this time with the grace of Almighty God, because I know that in crafting my story, I've identified my passion, I know my purpose, and I'm using my pen as I work with my story. The end. Oh, I can't call it the end because my story is still loading. To be continued. To be continued. Any questions at this time?
Wow, wow. For those who missed it, steps in writing your story, planning, know what your goals are, write it down, revision, editing. You know, I was there writing down when he said, you know, here are the almost the 3 F's that I write down. Few friends, family, few friends. And faith, and I'm telling you, it's been really so insightful. We've gotten so many gems here, and I love how we've uniquely just tied the entire day's proceedings all together, so uniquely woven into one. You know, you've given me honestly so much. There should be a wealth of questions. Reminder to everyone, you can raise your hand to even give a comment as well. There's so much that I could touch on, just from the idea of, you know, and I love how the journey is never finished, and how it is that we continue to apply ourselves in that way. As persons are saying, thank you for an incredible presentation. Questions are flying. Just continue to send, everyone, and just continue to send as we acknowledge that it's been such an incredible way. One of the first things I got here earlier before you even finished was, just bring it all together. Would you say that all these experiences, and you'll say yes, but just where all these experiences, tools in shaping, even though you did continue down a certain path? I'll add on to that to say, I remember especially when you were telling the story about how if I just did, you know, in English here, I could do it and do well, but I wanted to even do it in a way that I could help people. So just say how these are all tools in shaping those decisions like that, because he did continue along a certain path anyways.
Well, one of the things that life teaches you, and then when you get older and now that I'm at this stage, there are things I look back on and I recognize how it shaped. But very often in the middle of the journey, what we might seem to believe, we might think it's an obstacle. We might think it's keeping us back. And again, it's why, and tonight is that theme of faith in God. Tonight has been that theme. That's the running thread tonight. When you're not sure, you keep moving. Kirk said that earlier. When you're not sure, you keep moving. But if you don't keep moving, you're going to get stuck. And I also believe Serena spoke about it. We've heard those stories. We've seen the memes. And the famous one is the guy who was digging in the diamond mine and thought he wasn't going anywhere, and he gave up. And he was so close to it. If we don't keep moving, we will not see the overall success, or we might accept minuscule success when something greater is ahead. So I've learned, and if I could leave anything with those of you who are on the platform tonight who might be in that phase of your story where, and permit me to just demonstrate, I'm a visual person. All of us who've done any kind of writing, we know about tearing out. Everybody know about this? We know about that.
Yeah, we do.
You
We
sit
do.
down, you start to write, and you know, it's like, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. No. It's life. This is why I said that writing the stories, it's life. There will be those times when we have, that's not working. That's not working. Tear that page out. We have to do that, but understand that there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It is an important part of the overall completed story, and it's part of the journey. So don't be afraid to tear out the page, tear it up, rip it up, throw it away, burn it, but keep writing, keep moving, don't stop.
And I love how, funny enough, there's a comment in the chat that says, do we even have anything to ask? This is, we honestly need to sit and listen to the brilliance putting forward before. But of course, there are questions as well. And we have another comment here from Kesha, guy who says that the main takeaway so far is that know your worth, document those accomplishments, and quantify what you bring to the table. Don't just assume your boss and people around you know what you're doing. We have this thinking that self-praise is low praise, but there is no such thing. There is another question though that from Simone that says, when you decided to start your company, what were some of the challenges that you had to face and overcome?
Self-doubt. The biggest one was self-doubt because, and again, over the years, I've learned that now because it operates in a very in a type of cycle. I would advertise, and in the beginning, I would advertise 4 classes, and I'd realize how print flyers in the past, and I used to put ads in the paper, and no one would respond in the beginning. No one would respond, or I'll get 1 or 2. But over time, I realized that, and I've learned to relax. Don't worry if the people don't respond according to my mental deadline. Because you'd have a deadline in your mind where you're expecting a certain degree of response. What I started to notice is that, unfortunately, for many people back then, is that people would respond when the need became more desperate. And very often I was advertising when the need was not as desperate because I'm putting things in place. So people started responding when they recognized, oh, my child has exams next year. They would start to apply for the classes in their exam year. And again, because I've been doing this, I've been doing the private tuition for over 25 years. I started to get to a place where I did not have to advertise all the time. I've had families, they've sent all of their children. I've had people who, they came, they sent their sister, they sent their brother. People who came in the adult classes, or people who I taught at the university level, who I taught to become teachers. And then they had children, so they started sending their children at the primary level. And you know, now you'll get the call, I got your number from so-and-so, I got your name from so-and-so. But what happened in the beginning, you see that self-doubt that made you feel like this is not going to work. It's not going to work. And then you listen to the wrong voices in your head. This is why it's so important. Again, faith. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I'm the head and not the tail. And to be able to voice the correct words for yourself. Make those declarations for yourself, because if you are operating in purpose, if you are working with your passion, the doors will open. And trust me, you may stand by that door knocking, leaning, banging. It's not opening at that time. But keep moving. If you could learn how to lean up by a door and still move, that's what you need to do. Lean up by that door and still move. Keep your eyes open, because you might be leaning on the door, focusing on the door, but the window opens. So we have to be preparing while we are observing, but we don't get stagnant.
Have to be prepared while we're observing.
That's
right. And I absolutely love that. And it's just such a wealth of breath of fresh air just listening. And as Dennis says, keep moving, and good advice. Beverly Young has a question that says, how did your faith just help you overcome some of these challenges during? Because I know it was really fun. You mentioned being away from your family, even though you wanted to be away before. How does your faith help you?
I'll tell you, I remembered one night I was in my dorm in Barbados crying. I tell you, when I listened to Serena, there's so many things that Serena said that, like, I was like, she's sharing my story. I'm hearing my story. And I was in Barbados. I think I was in my second year, and I was really, really homesick. And again, because I made a decision to become a little more assertive and I was in a new environment, I'd actually gotten involved in the guild, and I became the chairperson of my hall. And it meant that I had to work with this team and move this team forward. And it was really out of my comfort zone. Nonetheless, there was one night I was in my room and I was homesick. I was really homesick, and I remember crying. And it could have been about midnight. You know, UWI life, nighttime is the busiest time, especially if you're on the dorm. And I was homesick, and someone came and knocked on my door and said, you know, Kimmery, there's a call for you. You had the phone on the block. And I'm thinking, who's calling me at this hour? And I got to the phone, and a friend called from home in Tobago. And he said, I just called to check on you. You are on my mind. And this was, I'm telling you what year this was, huh? This was 2002. This was 2002. But I remembered it because it was at that point that God reminded me, you're not alone. Even when you feel lonely, even when you feel discouraged, I'm here with you in this journey, and I will send people to support you and encourage you. I remembered another day in Barbados, a time when I was feeling very low, and I was involved with the Universities and Colleges Christian Fellowship, UCCF, Universities and Colleges Christian Fellowship, and the president of the association asked to check me one morning, and we were talking, and I was really feeling depressed because I had to learn to overcome depression at the time. And he got me to talk. Because what I'd recognized, and yes, I'm glad they asked that question. This is important. I should have included it in the presentation. He shared something very profound with me because I had been working so hard to become so independent. I craved independence. This is again why I went so far away from family, and I wanted to be on my own so that I'll be a strong, independent Black woman. And he said to me, God never called us to be independent. He called us to be interdependent. And that hit home. Interestingly, the year after, that's when I went back to Trinidad. I did my final year at St. Augustine. Because at the end of the 2 years in Barbados, I learned what I needed to learn. And again, understanding purpose. I needed to be in Barbados to grow. And when he said that to me, I was prepared now to go back closer to home, closer to family. Because in every step of the journey, God kept showing me, I have not left you. You may want to leave me, but I have not and will not leave you. He sends people at the right time. He sends the word at the right time. You turn on the radio and you hear something like, wait, that's for me. Something happens at the right time, and God just has a way of whispering and getting your attention. And I would not have gotten to this point without the faith. I came home, I remembered, and again, I said I was struggling with depression for many years, and I've learned how to overcome it through praise and singing. But I was home one night, depressed, home, crying to myself that, oh, I'm so alone. I was already divorced. I hadn't remarried. My son was visiting his father in the US, at home, alone, the lights off, the TV on. You know, you create the atmosphere for the depression and the pity party. And I'm home. And my sister called me. And I remember picking up the phone thinking, I don't want nobody bothering me now. And she called me and she said, listen, Kim, you could talk to a lady. She's going through a tough time. That's how I'm thinking. But I'm going through a tough time too. And then my sister explained what the lady was going through. Well, I had to dry up my tears one time because I realized I did not have a problem. Because her situation was so heavy. But the woman needed someone to talk to who had experienced a difficult marriage. And that was another lesson that showed me, Kim, what you went through with that divorce has to be part of your story because there are people who've had it worse. My ex-husband and I talk today. We talk, we laugh, we joke. There's some people who cannot do that because of how bad it was. And I remembered at that point, I dried up. I never cried about depression and feeling lonely again after that day, because I recognized that I needed to use that part of my journey because there are people who needed the story and there are people who needed some support because their stories, their situation was worse. They needed help.
And I absolutely just love the breadth of information persons are saying that it's just amazing just hearing this come out. You know, Kevin was asking, the smooth moving mean I can continue? And absolutely, yes. And I think that's shown really, really well. The chat is going and is full of praise and full of commendation. We have Kesha and person saying she's amazing. We're ready for next week. Ready? and we're ready for another day. Everyone, it's so amazing. Gloria says, which I believe as perhaps will be the comment that makes you smile the most. Kimori, she says she is ready to write her story right now. And I believe that right there is one of the perfect way in which we can just bring it all together about why it is that we are here, ladies and gentlemen. Kesha says such a diverse group of presenters. She's truly wowed by the wealth of information and disseminated. You know, she's going to be taking up, she's going to be finding the finders and finding the helpers. That's one last thing I guess I could ask you. It's just for the persons that want a bit of a little more inspiration, if it is, or wanting to reach out for your services, how they could find you at professional space and email that they can continue. And as well for your company, I know that's another one in which you're doing really good things.
So they can find me on LinkedIn, they can find me on Facebook. In order to connect with me, I'll say LinkedIn and Facebook. My number is a public number because I put it out there for business purposes. It's 1-868-723-5239. In fact, this is it, 1-868, because it's Trinidad and Tobago, 1-868-723-LADY. Let's put it that way, 723-LADY, 723-LADY, 723-LADY. Trinidad and Tobago area code 723-LADY. And you have it there. You can get me on WhatsApp, as I said, Facebook, and we go from there.
I absolutely love that, and I love how we start. We have heard daily six today. Find the helpers, and how it is that we can move from that session. Persons are absolutely loving, and I want to just overall just thank you for your time. I can't even say your time and expertise. I have to say for the stories, for the injection of passion and motivation to get moving as well. And I think especially when when you said so many things there about, oh, well, I have a problem too. I need to dry mine. And you're like, I don't have it's been amazing, amazing being here. And well, thank you. And I want to thank you, Miss Richardson Thomas, just for being here again today. And I know we truly, truly appreciated it.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate the collaboration with UPRO and the UWI Alumni Association for creating this platform. And again, it really has been a privilege and a pleasure being with you all tonight. Thank you again.
Thank you, thank you. I saw some things in the chat a while ago, and I said from the very beginning that this is going to be an exemplary evening. One that would make the night feel young, the night feel long, and I can honestly say that we would say day three would not disappoint. We said don't worry about it, and I can be pleased to say I think we've gone beyond all the other days in terms of time. Simone says day three, 3 days is not enough, and I believe this has really been such a pleasure and an honor being here for every single person. She's sending her LinkedIn link in the chat at the moment for us to listen, and I think it's been exemplary. You know, when I started off this week on Tuesday, as I brought, spectacle and brought attention to the partners for this conference, the UEI, the Alumni Relations Arm, and the YoPro Global Foundation, I said that it's perhaps fitting that we're discussing persons navigating life journeys, life lessons on the pathway to present day. And it's fitting as well that the UE Alumni Relations, which speaks about one UE, one alumni family together, and the YoPro Global Foundation, which is saying that exactly what we've been doing here, that by providing access to information, coaching, mentorship, development, employment, that we can empower persons worldwide, not just in our backyards, worldwide. And I believe these 3 days, Mrs. Maxwell, have been a testament, a true testament of what it is that we can be doing. You know, on our first day, I can remember someone said, they said, presenter, thank you, Dr. Richardson. You know, I'm ready to step out. He's in that moment. I won't maybe call him out here. He said, I'm in that moment of ready to get moving and to change where I want to go. And it was no accident. And I'm glad I came here tonight. He came back the next night again. And he was saying, I am ready in that moment. And I have been seeing persons here with us. And if you didn't believe it, if it was just off a whim and you thought it was just the promotion and the promotional, aesthetics of the information, then you have no doubt in your mind now that the Soft and Life Skills Series Conference is the place to be. Anytime, all day, every webinar. And I'm going to invite you to continue to tune in, keep updated with our latest, monthly webinars as well. You can check out our Instagram and social media page at UE Alumni Online. You can check on YouTube where we share rebroadcasts of a lot of these recordings. You may even find yourselves on this at the University of the West Indies Alumni Online. Ladies and gentlemen, Michelle is giving a lot of praises for me, but I cannot give the praise to myself because the praise is for the audience and you all who have stayed. You've stayed with us. I said tonight that as we go later and further in the night, the numbers, Mrs. Maxwell, strangely are going up. And that, I am telling you, is amazing and fantastic. Congratulations to you, Kevin, Spanking Harris, Simone. Simone has been here every day. Kesha has been here, Gloria, and here for the final time. And for now, until you follow us again, this is me signing out, wishing you a pleasant evening. You're a fantastic audience. Clap yourselves. Mrs. Maxwell is clapping herself. You're a fantastic audience. And I believe that it is there that I will sign out for the night. Ladies and gentlemen, find the helpers. Kesha, you can find me as well on LinkedIn if you need to in the moment. And I can be honest that we'll all be taking from this. Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned. And I wish you a pleasant evening. No, or rather tomorrow. I'm only joking. Thank you for being with us so far.